The morning air at Nellie's Air Force Base hung thick with desert heat and unspoken tension. Senior Airman Kalina, Ghost, Voss stepped onto the tarmac, her flight suit crisp against the Nevada sun, but her eyes carried something darker than the pre-dawn shadows. The other pilots gathered near the briefing hangar, their conversations dying to whispers as she passed. She'd heard the jokes before, how command had assigned a desk jockey to their elite tactical squadron, how her previous assignment pushing papers at Peterson didn't qualify her for real combat training. What they didn't know, what her personnel file conveniently omitted, was that Kalina had once been the most feared close air support pilot in Afghanistan before a classified incident grounded her for 2 years. The squadron leader, Major Rick Bulldog Morrison, emerged from the hangar carrying a clipboard thick with mission parameters. His weathered face, scarred from an ejection seat mishap in Iraq, showed no emotion as he surveyed his pilots. Listen up, people. Today's exercise simulates a danger-close fire mission. Ground teams are pinned down, enemy armor advancing. Standard CAS protocol. His eyes found Kalina. Voss, you're flying Warthog 77. Try not to embarrass yourself. The other pilots snickered. Captain Torres nudged his wingman. $20 says she can't even find the target area. More laughter rippled through the group, but Kalina's expression remained stone-cold professional. She'd learned long ago that reactions only fed the machine of military mockery. Walking toward her assigned A-10 Thunderbolt II, Kalina felt the familiar weight of solitude. The aircraft sat like a gray predator on the flight line, its distinctive twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, the legendary GAU-8 cannon protruding from its nose like a mechanical fang. Ground crew scattered as she approached, performing final pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. The crew chief, a grizzled sergeant named Martinez, handed her the aircraft logbook. "She's all yours, ma'am," he said quietly. "Heard you used to fly these birds overseas." Kalina nodded once, her throat tight. "Different lifetime, Sergeant." As she climbed into the cockpit, muscle memory took over. Her hands moved across switches and displays with unconscious precision, each movement a reminder of missions flown in different skis, under different circumstances. The HUD flickered to life, casting green light across her visor. Radio chatter filled her headset, other pilots running through their checklists, tower controllers coordinating takeoff sequences. But beneath it all, Kalina heard something else. The ghost of her own voice from 3 years ago, calling in fire missions that saved lives and haunted dreams. She keyed her radio. "Tower, Warthog 77 ready for departure." "Warthog 77 cleared for takeoff runway 21. Good hunting." The turbofan spooled up with a rising whine. Kalina released the brakes, and 25 tons of American-built destruction began rolling toward whatever waited in the desert sky. Behind her, the other pilots watched through the briefing room windows, still smiling, still underestimating. They had no idea what they were about to witness. The A-10 lifted off with the grace of a mechanical swan, its gray camouflage disappearing against the morning haze. Kalina banked northwest toward the training range, her radio quiet except for routine position reports. Below, the Nevada landscape stretched endlessly, brown mountains, alkali flats, and the occasional dirt road cutting geometric lines through wilderness. The Thunderbolt climbed steadily, its twin General Electric turbofans pushing her toward the designated combat zone, where ground controllers waited with laser designators and radio calls for help. "Warthog 77, this is Desert Storm Control," crackled through her headset. The voice belonged to Technical Sergeant Williams, a forward air controller she'd never worked with before. "We have simulated friendly forces taking heavy fire from armored vehicles. Grid coordinates follows. November Delta 478236. How copy?" Kalina's fingers moved across her navigation system, inputting the coordinates with mechanical precision. "Desert Storm Control, Warthog 77 copies grid November Delta 478236. Request target description and friendly positions." Warthog 77, we have two T-72 main battle tanks approximately 800 meters northeast of friendly positions. Friendlies are marked with infrared strobes, danger close fire mission authorized. Repeat, danger close authorized. The words danger close sent familiar electricity through Kalina's nervous system. It meant friendly troops were within the minimum safe distance from the target, a scenario requiring surgical precision and absolute confidence. She'd flown dozens of such missions in Afghanistan, each one a dance between salvation and catastrophe. Her hands tightened on the stick as she began her descent toward the target area. At 12,000 feet, Kalina rolled inverted and pulled her nose toward the desert floor. The A-10 accelerated in its dive, airspeed climbing past 300 knots. Through her targeting pod, she could see the simulated battlefield, smoke markers indicating friendly positions, target vehicles positioned exactly where the controller described. Her heart rate remained steady, professional, but something deeper stirred in her chest. This felt real. This felt like coming home. Desert Storm Control, Warthog 77 has visual on target area. Confirm friendly positions marked with strobes. Affirm, Warthog 77. Friendlies marked with strobes, cleared hot on armored vehicles northeast of friendlies. Kalina rolled wings level and lined up her attack run. The GAU-8 cannon sight pipper tracked across her HUD, moving toward the first simulated tank. At 2,000 feet, she squeezed the trigger. The Avenger cannon erupted with its distinctive sound, a mechanical roar that had earned the A-10 its nickname, Warthog. 30mm depleted uranium rounds streamed toward the target at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute, each bullet capable of penetrating tank armor like tissue paper. The first target erupted in simulated explosions, orange smoke billowing skyward. Kalina pulled up hard, G-forces pressing her into her seat as she gained altitude for another pass. Her breathing remained controlled, her movements economical. This was what she'd been born to do. Desert Storm Control, direct hit on Target 1, moving to Target 2. From the observation tower at Nelly's, Major Morrison watched through binoculars as Kalina's A-10 climbed and turned for its second attack run. The other pilots had joined him, their earlier mockery replaced by professional interest. Captain Torres lowered his own binoculars, frowning. That was a textbook gun run, he admitted reluctantly. Perfect angle, perfect timing. Morrison said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He'd seen the preliminary flight records. Kalina had logged over 200 combat hours in Afghanistan before her reassignment. What he hadn't seen, what remained buried in classified files, was the reason for that reassignment. As he watched her A-10 line up for its second attack, something told him there was more to Senior Airman Voss than anyone realized. Kalina rolled into her final attack run, the desert floor rising to meet her aircraft once again. The second target grew larger in her HUD, the targeting reticle tracking smoothly across simulated armor. At 1,500 feet, she opened fire again. The GAU-8 spoke its mechanical language of destruction, and the second target disappeared in orange smoke and flying debris. Desert Storm Control, Warthog 77, both targets destroyed. Request battle damage assessment. Warthog 77, outstanding shooting. Both targets eliminated, no friendly casualties. You're cleared to return to base. As Kalina climbed away from the target area, banking southeast toward Nelly's, she felt the familiar emptiness that followed successful missions. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving behind questions she'd spent 2 years trying to answer. Why had command really transferred her from combat operations? What had happened during her last mission in Afghanistan that required classification levels she wasn't cleared to know? The answers remained locked away, but flying the A-10 again felt like touching a live wire connected to her past. The landing pattern at Nelly's was crowded with training aircraft. F-16s returning from air-to-air exercises, helicopters conducting search and rescue drills, transport planes delivering personnel and supplies. Kalina slotted her A-10 into the approach sequence, her radio calls professional and precise. The Thunderbolt touched down with barely a bump, its thick landing gear absorbing the impact with engineered grace. As she taxied toward the flight line, ground crew emerged to marshal her aircraft into its parking spot. The engine spun down with gradually decreasing whine, and Kalina began her post-flight procedures with methodical efficiency. Switches off, systems secured, logbook entries completed. But as she removed her helmet, her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves or adrenaline, but from memory. Flying the A-10 again had awakened something she'd tried to bury, something connected to a classified mission, and the reason she'd spent 2 years pushing papers instead of flying combat aircraft. Climbing down from the cockpit, she found Sergeant Martinez waiting with a subtle smile. "How'd she handle, ma'am?" "Like riding a bicycle, Sergeant. A very large, very angry bicycle." Martinez chuckled, but his expression grew serious. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, I heard rumors about your previous assignment, Afghanistan." Kalina's jaw tightened. "Ancient history, Sergeant, just training flights now." But as she walked toward the debriefing hangar, she knew that wasn't true. The past had a way of refusing to stay buried, especially when it involved classified missions, friendly fire incidents, and the kind of split-second decisions that haunted pilots' dreams. The other pilots would want answers about her performance today, but the real questions, the ones that mattered, remained locked in files she wasn't allowed to read. The debriefing room buzzed with quiet conversation as Kalina entered. Major Morrison stood at the front, reviewing her mission videotape on a large monitor. The other pilots turned to watch her, their earlier mockery replaced by something resembling professional curiosity. She took a seat in the back row, her expression neutral but her mind racing through memories of different debriefings in different theaters of war. Morrison froze the video at the moment of her first gun run. "Senior Airman Voss, your target engagement was textbook perfect. Angle of attack, ammunition conservation, battle damage assessment, everything by the book." He paused, studying her face. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a burning target. Kalina felt every pair of eyes in the room focused on her, waiting for an answer she couldn't give. Her previous assignment was classified beyond their clearance levels, her combat experience officially non-existent. She'd been flying a desk for 2 years precisely because someone with stars on their collar had decided she knew too much about operations that never officially happened. "Standard training, sir. Gunnery school, weapons qualification courses." Morrison's expression suggested he didn't believe her, but military protocol prevented him from pushing further. He continued the debriefing with professional detachment, reviewing targeting procedures and safety protocols. But Kalina could feel the unasked questions radiating from her squadron mates, their curiosity mixing with grudging respect. Captain Torres kept glancing at her, his earlier smugness replaced by puzzlement. Lieutenant Harper, the squadron's youngest pilot, watched her with something approaching awe. After dismissal, Kalina walked alone toward the base exchange, craving coffee and solitude. The Nevada sun had climbed higher, baking the asphalt until it shimmered like water. Other airmen passed in small groups, their conversations fatting as they recognized her flight suit and squadron patches. Word traveled fast on military bases, especially when someone performed beyond expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Impressive flying today. We need to talk. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, Special Operations Command." Kalina stared at the message, her blood suddenly running cold. Colonel Mitchell was a name from her classified past, connected to operations in Afghanistan that officially never happened. If Mitchell was reaching out now, after 2 years of silence, it meant something had changed. Something that required pilots with experience in missions that didn't exist on any official record. She deleted the message and continued walking, but her hands shook slightly as she pocketed the phone. The past wasn't staying buried after all. It was climbing out of its grave, wearing the face of superior officers and carrying orders that would drag her back into a world she'd tried to escape. The A-10 had felt like coming home, but home wasn't always a safe place to be. That evening, Kalina sat alone in her base quarters, staring at her laptop screen. Her official personnel file showed 2 years of administrative assignments at Peterson Air Force Base. Routine staff work, no combat experience, no classified operations. But burned into her memory were images of different skis, different targets, different consequences. She'd been the best close air support pilot in her theater, right up until the moment everything went wrong, and people with security clearances above her pay grade decided she needed to disappear. Her doorbell chimed, interrupting her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in dress blues with eagles on her shoulders, Colonel Mitchell, looking exactly as she remembered from classified briefings 3 years ago. Tall, silver-haired, with pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Kalina considered not answering, but military protocol and curiosity won. She opened the door. "Hello, Kalina, may I come in?" "Colonel," Kalina stepped aside, her heart rate climbing. "This is unexpected." Mitchell entered and glanced around the spartanly furnished quarters, regulation furniture, few personal items, the living space of someone who'd learned to travel light. "I saw your performance today. Impressive shooting for someone who's been flying a desk for 2 years. Standard gunnery skills, ma'am, nothing special." Mitchell smiled thinly. "We both know that's not true. You were the best CAS pilot in Afghanistan before the Kandahar incident. 7 confirmed friendly fire saves, 14 direct action support missions, 0 civilian casualties. Until classified events that I'm not cleared to discuss," Kalina interrupted. "Ma'am, that's about to change." Mitchell produced a manila envelope sealed with red tape. "Your security clearance has been reactivated. There's a situation developing that requires your specific skill set." Kalina stared at the envelope without taking it. Inside would be orders that pulled her back into the classified world of special operations, where missions didn't officially exist and pilots sometimes disappeared from the historical record. She'd spent 2 years trying to forget that world, building a new identity as a routine training pilot. But the Thunderbolt had reminded her who she really was, and apparently others had noticed. "What kind of situation?" Mitchell's expression grew grave. "The kind that requires pilots who can put 30mm rounds exactly where they need to go, under circumstances that can never be officially acknowledged. The kind that made you famous in certain circles before the Kandahar incident required your reassignment." The phrase Kandahar incident hit Kalina like a physical blow. 3 years later, she still couldn't remember everything that happened during that final mission. Some memories remained locked behind classification barriers her own mind had erected. She remembered the A-10, the target coordinates, the desperate radio calls for close air support. But the ending, the reason for her immediate reassignment to administrative duties, remained frustratingly blank. "I can't remember what happened in Kandahar," she said quietly. "I know, that's why you're perfect for this assignment." Mitchell placed the envelope on Kalina's coffee table and headed for the door. "You have 24 hours to decide. But understand this. Your performance today reminded everyone why you were the most requested CAS pilot in theater. Some wars require pilots who can't be officially acknowledged. Consider whether you're ready to be officially forgotten again." After Mitchell left, Kalina stared at the sealed envelope for hours. Red tape meant special access programs, operations that existed in the gray spaces between acknowledgement and denial. Opening it would mean returning to a world where her own memories couldn't be trusted, where missions disappeared from official records and pilots sometimes followed suit. But it would also mean flying the A-10 in combat again, using skills that felt more natural than breathing. At midnight, she broke the red tape. The classified briefing materials inside painted a picture of emerging threats in unnamed regions. requiring close air support assets that couldn't be officially deployed. Shadow wars fought by pilots whose names never appeared in casualty reports, whose victories were never celebrated, whose failures were never investigated. It was everything she'd tried to escape and everything she'd been born to do. Her orders were simple: report to an unmarked hangar at Creech Air Force Base in 72 hours for assignment to Training Squadron Alpha, a unit that didn't officially exist, flying missions that never officially happened. The same kind of unit she'd belonged to in Afghanistan before the Kandahar incident erased her from the historical record. Kalina closed the envelope and walked to her bedroom window. Outside, the lights of Nellie's Air Force Base twinkled against the desert darkness. Routine training operations, official missions, pilots whose names would be remembered. Tomorrow she would submit her transfer request and begin the process of official disappearance again. In 72 hours, she would become a ghost in the machine of American military power. But tonight, for the last time in years, she slept without nightmares. The flight line at Creech Air Force Base looked identical to every other military installation. Gray buildings, geometric precision, the organizational beauty of American military efficiency. But Kalina knew the differences were hidden beneath the surface, in the classification levels of the aircraft and the mission briefings that never saw daylight. She carried a single duffel bag and orders that directed her to Hangar 7, a nondescript building indistinguishable from its neighbors except for the armed guards and the lack of identifying numbers. Inside Hangar 7, she found 6 A-10 Thunderbolt IIs in non-standard camouflage schemes, desert tan mixed with gray, no national markings, no squadron identifiers. They looked like ghost aircraft, designed to operate in conflicts that didn't officially exist. Maintenance crews worked with quiet efficiency, their uniforms bearing no unit patches or name tags. Everything about the operation suggested careful anonymity. Senior Airman Voss, a man approached from the aircraft maintenance area, wearing the uniform of a chief master sergeant but no identifying insignia. "I'm Johnson. Welcome to Alpha Squadron." Kalina followed Johnson through the hangar, nodding details that confirmed her suspicions about the unit's nature. No official documentation visible, no unit awards or historical displays, no photographs of previous squadron members. This was a place where people came to disappear professionally, to fight wars that couldn't be acknowledged and fly missions that never officially happened. "Your aircraft is tail number 847, Johnson said, indicating an A-10 that looked subtly different from the others. Newer avionics, modified weapons pylons, electronic warfare equipment that wasn't standard on conventional Thunderbolts. She's been configured for special operations support. Extended range tanks, enhanced targeting systems, communication gear for joint operations with units that don't officially exist." Kalina ran her hand along the aircraft's fuselage, feeling the familiar texture of titanium armor and composite materials. This A-10 was built for the kind of missions she'd flown in Afghanistan, where targets were often surrounded by friendly forces and political considerations required surgical precision. The kind of flying that separated competent pilots from legendary ones. "What's the mission profile?" Johnson glanced around the hangar, confirming they were alone. "Training flights for now. Getting you requalified on enhanced A-10 systems, familiarizing you with new targeting protocols. The real missions come later, after you've been officially reassigned to administrative duties at Peterson." The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 2 years in actual administrative assignments, only to be reassigned to fake administrative duties that would provide cover for real combat operations. Military bureaucracy had a way of eating its own tail, creating layers of deception that sometimes confused the people implementing them. Over the following weeks, Kalina flew daily training missions that felt more like combat preparation than routine exercises. Navigation routes through mountainous terrain similar to Afghanistan and Syria, targeting exercises against simulated enemy positions, practice runs with laser-guided munitions that weren't supposed to exist. Each flight rebuilt muscle memory she'd thought was permanently lost, skills that came back with frightening ease. Her flying partner was Captain Marcus Reaper Thompson, a pilot whose official record showed transport aircraft experience but whose actual expertise was clearly close air support. They worked together with the wordless efficiency of combat veterans, their radio communications abbreviated and professional. Neither asked about the other's background. In Alpha Squadron, everyone's past was officially classified. Ghost Reaper, your target coordinates for today's mission, the anonymous briefer announced during their morning session. No names, no unit designations, just call signs and coordinates that place them in simulated combat scenarios, growing increasingly complex. Today's exercise involved multiple targets in urban terrain, with friendly forces requiring danger-close fire support, exactly the kind of mission that had made Kalina's reputation in Afghanistan. Flying at 15,000 feet over the Nevada desert, Kalina felt the familiar satisfaction of the A-10's handling characteristics. The Thunderbolt wasn't graceful like fighters or powerful like bombers. It was simply perfect for its intended mission. Built around the GAU-8 cannon, armored against ground fire, slow enough for precise targeting but fast enough to survive modern battlefields. It was an aircraft designed by people who understood that close air support was as much art as science. Ghost Reaper, we have friendlies in contact, requesting immediate fire support, crackled through their headsets. The voice belonged to a ground controller whose accent suggested actual combat experience in Middle Eastern theaters. These training exercises used real forward air controllers with real experience, adding authenticity that couldn't be simulated. Kalina rolled into her attack run with Thompson following at combat spacing. Through her targeting pod, she could see the simulated battlefield, buildings marked as civilian structures, targets identified as enemy positions, friendly forces marked with infrared strobes that only showed through their enhanced vision systems. The complexity was far beyond standard training exercises, suggesting preparation for actual combat operations in urban environments. Reaper, Ghost has visual on target building, northwest corner second floor. Confirm friendlies clear of target area. Ghost Reaper confirms friendlies clear. You are cleared hot. Kalina lined up her shot with mechanical precision, the GAU-8's targeting system overlaying precise calculations on her HUD. At 2,000 feet, she squeezed the trigger, and the cannon erupted with its distinctive roar. 30mm rounds streaked toward the target building, each bullet guided by computers and corrected by her instinctive understanding of ballistics and wind conditions. The target exploded in simulated orange smoke, but Kalina's satisfaction was tempered by growing awareness that these weren't really training exercises. The scenarios were too specific, the targets too realistic, the intelligence too detailed. Alpha Squadron was preparing for actual missions, and she was being trained to support operations that would never appear in official records. That evening, alone in her quarters at Creech, Kalina tried to piece together the bigger picture. Her orders said training squadron, but the exercises felt like mission rehearsals. The aircraft were configured for combat, not training. The other pilots had the quiet professionalism of operators, not instructors. Everything suggested preparation for deployment to regions where American forces weren't officially present. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Phase 1 training complete. Report to Building 47 tomorrow 600 for mission briefing. Colonel Mitchell. Building 47 didn't appear on any base directory Kalina could find, but she located it using coordinates provided in the message. It was an unremarkable concrete structure near the base perimeter, distinguished only by multiple antennas and the complete absence of identifying markers. Inside, she found a briefing room equipped with secure communication gear and wall-mounted displays showing satellite imagery of terrain she didn't immediately recognize. Colonel Mitchell waited with two other officers whose uniforms bore no identifying information. Maps covered one wall, topographical features that could have been anywhere in the world, marked with symbols indicating friendly and enemy positions. The level of detail suggested active intelligence gathering, not theoretical scenarios. "Good morning, Kalina. I trust your training has been productive." "Yes, ma'am. A-10 systems, targeting protocols, joint operations procedures. Very thorough." Mitchell nodded toward the maps. "Your first operational mission. Officially, you're conducting routine training flights from Peterson Air Force Base. Unofficially, you'll be providing close air support for assets engaged in counterterrorism operations in North Africa." The euphemism, counterterrorism operations, covered a multitude of activities that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Kalina studied the maps, recognizing terrain features that suggested Libyan or Algerian desert regions where various militant groups operated beyond governmental control, places where American forces might be present for reasons that couldn't survive public scrutiny. Rules of engagement: minimize civilian casualties, protect friendly assets, maintain operational security at all costs. Your call sign for this mission will be Sandstorm. Duration approximately 30 days. Return to administrative duties at Peterson upon completion. Mitchell handed her another sealed envelope. Mission details, communication protocols, emergency procedures. Your aircraft has been prepositioned at a forward operating base that doesn't officially exist. Any questions? Kalina had dozens of questions, but experience with classified operations told her most wouldn't be answered. The nature of shadow warfare was operational need to know, and her need was limited to flying the A-10 and engaging targets as directed. The bigger political and strategic picture remained above her clearance level. "When do I deploy?" "Your flight leaves tonight." 12 hours later, Kalina sat in the cargo bay of a C-130 transport aircraft flying through darkness toward coordinates she wasn't authorized to know. Her gear consisted of flight suit, survival equipment, and a sidearm she hoped never to use. The other passengers were equally anonymous, operators whose faces she couldn't see clearly in the dim red lighting, their conversations limited to professional necessities. The loadmaster signaled their approach to the destination, and Kalina felt the familiar sensation of controlled descent toward an unknown landing strip. Through the aircraft's small windows, she saw only darkness punctuated by occasional light, the signature of a forward operating base trying to maintain minimal visibility. In 6 hours, she would be flying combat missions in support of operations that didn't officially exist, using skills that had been officially forgotten, in support of objectives she would never be authorized to fully understand. The C-130 touched down on what felt like a dirt airstrip, its engines revering thrust to slow the aircraft quickly. As the cargo ramp lowered, hot desert air filled the cabin, carrying scents of dust and aviation fuel. Outside, ground crews waited in darkness, their faces obscured by night vision equipment. Kalina grabbed her gear and followed the other passengers into a landscape that could have been anywhere in the world's conflict zones. Her new home for the next 30 days was a collection of prefabricated buildings and hardened aircraft shelters, arranged with military precision but designed to be quickly disassembled. No permanent structures, no identifying markers, no evidence that American forces had ever been present. It was the kind of base that existed temporarily, served its purpose, and vanished without trace. The operations center was a climate-controlled trailer filled with communication equipment and situation displays showing real-time intelligence feeds from various sources. Maps covered every wall, tactical displays, target folders, friendly unit positions. This wasn't training anymore. This was preparation for actual combat against enemies who would shoot back with live ammunition. "Sandstorm, welcome to Forward Operating Base Echo," said the duty officer, a major whose uniform bore no unit insignia. "Your aircraft is in Shelter 3, pre-flight scheduled for 500 hours. Mission briefing in 30 minutes." Kalina's A-10 had been positioned in a hardened shelter designed to protect aircraft from mortar and rocket attacks. Seeing it under artificial lighting, she noticed additional modifications: radar warning receivers, chaff and flare dispensers, electronic warfare equipment designed to help survive in contested airspace. This was an A-10 configured for combat in environments where enemy air defenses might be active. The mission briefing revealed the complexity of modern shadow warfare. Friendly forces were engaged in advisory operations, with local government troops fighting extremist elements in remote desert regions. Her role would be providing close air support when local air forces weren't available or capable, using weapons and tactics that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Every aspect of the operation was designed to maintain plausible deniability. Primary targets are enemy logistics sites, training camps, and command centers, the briefer explained, using a laser pointer to indicate positions on satellite imagery. Secondary mission includes danger-close support for friendly forces when specifically requested. All operations must appear to be conducted by unidentified aircraft using non-American weapons systems. The last requirement explained the A-10's unusual armament: Russian-designed rockets and ammunition that couldn't be traced to American sources. If she was shot down or captured, the aircraft's configuration would suggest mercenary operations rather than official U.S. military presence. It was a level of deception that made her stomach tighten with professional anxiety. Her first combat mission launched at dawn, her A-10 climbing into desert skis that reminded her uncomfortably of Afghanistan. The landscape below was empty except for occasional villages and nomadic settlements, but intelligence reports indicated significant enemy activity in the target area. Flying alone, maintaining radio silence except for essential communications, she felt the familiar isolation of combat aviation. "Sandstorm, Overwatch control, target coordinates incoming," crackled through her encrypted radio. The voice belonged to a ground controller whose location she couldn't determine. He might be anywhere from a nearby mountaintop to a bunker in Virginia. Modern warfare allowed control of combat operations from thousands of miles away, reducing risk to controllers but increasing the sense of disconnection between decision makers and consequences. The target was a suspected militant training camp in rocky terrain approximately 200 miles from any major population center. Satellite imagery showed multiple buildings, vehicle positions, and what appeared to be weapons storage facilities. Intelligence suggested 40 to 60 enemy personnel, no civilians, no friendly forces in the immediate area. It was the kind of target that allowed maximum freedom of engagement. Approaching from the east with the sun behind her, Kalina began her target reconnaissance at 15,000 feet. Through her targeting pod, she could see the compound in detail: armed guards, military vehicles, antenna arrays suggesting communication equipment. Everything matched the intelligence briefing, but years of combat experience had taught her to verify targets independently before engaging. Overwatch control: Sandstorm has visual on target area. Confirm no friendly forces within 5 kilometers. Sandstorm: Overwatch confirms no friendlies in area. You are cleared hot on designated target buildings. Kalina rolled into her attack dive, the familiar sensation of controlled aggression flowing through her nervous system. The accelerated toward the target compound, her hands steady on the controls despite adrenaline and the knowledge that this wasn't training anymore. People would die in the next 60 seconds, and their deaths would never be officially acknowledged or investigated. At 3,000 feet, she opened fire with the GAU-8, its mechanical roar echoing across the desert landscape. 30mm rounds swept across the compound, destroying buildings and vehicles with devastating efficiency. Secondary explosions suggested ammunition storage, confirming the intelligence assessment about the site's military nature. In less than 30 seconds, the training camp ceased to exist. Overwatch control, sandstorm, target destroyed. Multiple secondary explosions, significant battle damage observed. Sandstorm, excellent shooting, returned to base for debrief. Flying back toward the forward operating base, Kalina felt the familiar emptiness that followed successful combat missions. The target had been legitimate, the engagement clean, the results tactically satisfactory. But the official invisibility of the mission left her with questions that would never be answered and achievements that could never be acknowledged. She was fighting a war that didn't officially exist, achieving victories that would never be recorded, serving her country in ways that required her service to be forgotten. Over the following weeks, missions became routine: target identification, weapon delivery, battle damage assessment, return to base. Each operation was successful by military standards, contributing to larger strategic objectives that remained above her clearance level. She destroyed enemy logistics sites, eliminated command centers, provided close air support for friendly forces whose identities she never learned. The war was invisible, but it was definitely real. The 30th day of her deployment brought orders to return to administrative duties at Peterson Air Force Base. Her aircraft was cleaned of non-standard equipment. Her mission records were sealed at classification levels she couldn't access, and her orders directed her to report for routine staff assignments that would officially account for the past month. In 12 hours, she would board a transport aircraft and return to a world where her recent activities had never happened. But first, one final mission. Sandstorm emergency tasking, announced the duty officer as she prepared for departure. We have friendlies under attack, requesting immediate close air support. High priority, danger close engagement. Kalina strapped back into her A-10's cockpit, muscle memory overriding exhaustion and the anticipation of going home. Emergency missions were different from planned operations. Higher stakes, less preparation time, greater potential for both success and catastrophe. As she taxied toward the runway, she wondered if this final mission would provide closure to her month of invisible warfare or open new questions that couldn't be answered. The target area was 40 minutes flying time from base, located in mountainous terrain that restricted approach angles and complicated target acquisition. Radio communications from ground controllers painted a picture of desperate circumstances. Friendly reconnaissance unit surrounded by superior enemy forces, ammunition running low, casualties mounting. The kind of situation that required immediate intervention regardless of political considerations. Sandstorm, call sign Groundhog. We are taking heavy fire from enemy positions on ridgeline to our north, transmitted the ground controller, his voice tight with stress and background noise suggesting active combat. Requesting immediate fire support, danger close authorized. Approaching the engagement area at maximum speed, Kalina could see muzzle flashes and smoke indicating active fighting. Through her targeting pod, the tactical situation became clear. A small group of friendly forces pinned in rocky terrain by enemy fighters positioned on higher ground. Classic ambush scenario, with geography favoring the attackers and time favoring whoever could call in effective support first. Groundhog, Sandstorm has visual on your position. Confirm friendly locations with infrared strobes. Sandstorm, strobes active. Enemy positions are approximately 200 meters north of friendlies, dug in a long ridgeline. Multiple automatic weapons, possible mortars. 200 meters was extremely close for A-10 gun runs, margin of error measured in seconds and degrees rather than comfortable distances. Kalina had flown dozens of danger-close missions in Afghanistan, but each one required perfect execution and absolute confidence. One navigation error, one moment of target confusion, could result in friendly fire casualties that would haunt her for the remainder of her career. Rolling into her attack run, She aligned the GAU-8 carefully with the enemy positions while maintaining visual contact with friendly strobes. The targeting computer provided ballistic solutions, but ultimately the shot depended on pilot skill and intuitive understanding of wind, altitude, and aircraft performance. At 1,500 feet, she squeezed the trigger, and the Avenger cannon spoke its mechanical language of destruction. 30-millimeter rounds impacted along the ridgeline, walking across enemy positions with devastating precision. The hostile fire directed at friendly forces ceased immediately, replaced by secondary explosions indicating ammunition supplies. Kalina pulled up hard and banked for another pass, her